Hi everyone. On Monday this week, Donald Trump met with Vladimir Putin in Helsinki, as you no doubt know. And in the 4 or 5 days since then, to the time of me recording this, I think it's fair to say the mainstream media, half of America, and pretty much anybody on Twitter, 98% of those on Twitter with a blue check mark, have lost their connective tiny little minds. I'm just going to show you one example here. I could show you thousands. This is Rob Reiner. The United States was attacked. We didn't see bombs hitting Pearl Harbor. We didn't see the planes crash into buildings, but cyber missiles struck the heart of our democracy. It was an insidious act of war. Anyone who aids and abets this is committing treason. So what he's talking about there is the intelligence community's assessment that it was Russia that hacked the DNC, and it was the Russia that released their emails, which cost Hillary Clinton the election. That's what they're alleging. And they're calling Donald Trump treasonous for not going along with the intelligence community's assessment of affairs. Now, there are people like me and many others out there who don't believe what the intelligence community are telling us. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, these are the same people who lied to us about incubator babies. These are the same people who lied to us about weapons of mass destruction. And these are the very same people who lied to us about NSA surveillance, and not just lied to us, but lied in front of Congress, which is a federal offence. None of them served any time for it, of course, but they lied to us constantly over the last 2 or 3 decades. Why should we believe them now without any proof? Which is the second point. We've seen no proof. None. Nada. Zip. Zilch. All we've seen is some indictments, and which are, let's face it, just accusations. They're not proof. They're not evidence. They're accusations. That's all. No more, no less. And without proof, I'm not going to believe them. And neither should you. But the main thing, and the main reason I don't believe what they're saying, is we do actually have some evidence. It didn't come from the FBI though. It actually came directly from the source, who the FBI say hacked the DNC. And that's the online personality Guccifer 2. Now, we can examine the documents that he said he hacked from the DNC. When I say we, I mean experts, independent experts, experts with decades of experience in analysing metadata and analysing documents like this, chief among which are an organisation I've mentioned many times before. Mentioned them in my book, there's a link down below for that. Organisation called VIPS, Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. And the main guy there is this guy, Bill Binney, who, quite simply, is a genius. His track record is unbelievable. It really is. The guy is 1 in a billion. He did an interview actually the day before the summit. And it's on YouTube. I'll leave a link below, and I've took some clips from it just to try and explain to people exactly why I don't believe what the intelligence community is telling us, and I will not believe them until they provide cast iron proof. I just won't, because there is far too much evidence to say that this was not a hack. It was a leak. Now, the interview that Bill did on Sunday was with a lady called Tommy Collins, who I hadn't heard from before, but this interview was excellent. Like I said, there's a link down below, and she's from I think it's a YouTube channel called America Restored. I don't know whether it's on television or not. It might be on one of the cable channels. But it further proves to me that any accusations that Russia hacked the DNC are false. But Tommy asked him, first of all, what his experience is and who is Bill Binney. So let's just see what Bill says, who he is, and what his background is. Bill Binney, by the way, former technical director of the NSA. He was at the NSA, I believe, 37 years. This guy knows what he's talking about. Don't believe me? Listen to him.
Well, for close to 40 years, I just was analyzing large amounts of data mostly against the Soviet Union, but also the Warsaw Pact. So it was a very large data problem, and figuring out ways to be able to see into that data and figure out what it meant and what would constitute warning for this country and other countries. Yeah. So and I worked on different things like data systems, solving those systems, solving code systems, cipher systems, things like that.
Okay, so as you can tell there, he knows what he's talking about. This is an expert. But to be honest, Billy's being quite modest there when he's talking about his history at the NSA, because he's the man who wrote the algorithms which were used as the basis of the data collection programs for the NSA, chief among which is a program that him and his team manufactured to analyze data that was coming in, called ThinThread. So let's listen to what ThinThread is. Let's listen to what Bill says. Now, this is taken from a documentary. Again, I'll leave a link below, called A Good American, and the executive producer on that documentary was Oliver Stone, and we all know that Oliver Stone has got a great track record when it comes to documentaries. So this is what Bill says ThinThread was.
ThinThread was a program that absolutely would have prevented 9/11.
Just think about that. ThinThread was a program that absolutely would have would have stopped 9/11. So what is it? What is ThinThread, and how did it work? Well, it input all of the people's communications between phone lines and computers and anything digital on the planet into a graph, which was then used in conjunction with 5 key metadata points that could predict when a foreign power or terrorist cell were about to do something. So rather than me waffle on and get anything wrong, let's let Bill explain what it did and what this graph that he envisaged for ThinThread was. Oops, we'll start that again.
I basically envisioned the graph as a very large globe of the Earth, say. With a total of about 7 billion nodes in it, or dots, each representing an individual, and having all the connections of all those individuals with all the other connections they have anywhere in the world. Think of yourselves as drifting into the globe. So you're going inside the globe, and you can go to any point in the globe and look at any given point to see the relationships they have with all the other dots in the globe. When you go into the globe, you pick out a dot, you can pull it out of that relationship graph, and with it will come all of the nodes that it has a relationship with. When you pulled that node out in its community, if you will, the social network it had, you pulled all of the backup data that created those relationships to begin with, so that you could now timeline those relationships and see the interactions over a period of time, whatever you wanted to define. So that's how I envisioned the graph.
So there's a sort of visual depiction of what ThinThread was and the graph it used. And whenever any of these points within the graph, or these communication points or people, sparked one of these 5 metadata points, these alarm bells, you could literally go in, you would get a trigger, you could go in, you could pick up that data point and look at all of his interactions, or all of its interactions with the people around them, and then you could make evaluations and maybe run operations, I suppose. But there's more. So let's let Bill carry on to explain what ThinThread did. Oh yeah, Thin Thread was tested in Germany. They did a test in Germany. It was huge. It was a huge success to degree that they had to shut the test down because of the amount of data that it was bringing in was going to crash the system. I forgot that point. So this is what happened next when they sort of implemented it on a wider scale after the German test.
Shortly after the bad idling test, we had the whole system running, and then from there on, we just took in more and more data of large numbers of phones and large numbers of computers. We started consolidating that into my big graph, which we called the big ass graph. We started pulling in such a massive amount of data, and the system was working so well we could see no limit to it. Building relationships between billions of people. I mean, we're talking trillions of transactions. It was pretty clear that we were building the most powerful analysis tool that had been developed in history to monitor basically the entire world in near real time.
So quite simply, as Bill said there, he built the most powerful analysis tool that had ever been created. Him and his team built it. But the question came up, obviously, if you can track so many people's communications, you can spy on them. So what about anonymity? Anonymity, because if this is implemented, this would mean any person in the world, and indeed the USA, could be spied upon. The NSA could then do this, which is obviously against amendment rights in your constitution. So Bill explains now what he did to counteract that and to protect people's rights.
From our test with our big ass graph, it was pretty clear to us that we had to protect privacy rights of individuals. So we devised a way to build in protections and make it possible to encrypt all their attributes so you couldn't tell who they were and you couldn't analyze what they were doing because you couldn't identify them. And in cases where they weren't even in zones of suspicion, which we would define within the graph, their data wouldn't even be taken in, and so that no one would have an opportunity to abuse their privacy.
So Thin Thread would have made it virtually impossible for the NSA to spy on the American people, which they can do now, without having to jump through a lot of hoops. It would have to be totally anonymous, and the only way you could see exactly who that person was then to get what became known as the FISA warrant, I believe. Now the NSA didn't like that part. Unsurprisingly, the guys at the top, I think Hayden was the man who was head of the NSA at that time, they didn't like it. And although if implemented on a wider scale, Thin Thread would have only cost something like $300 million, the NSA decided to go down a different route, a route which wouldn't protect anonymity, and which would allow people to be spied upon, which cost billions of dollars instead of 300 million, and these contracts were given to outside contractors. Now, Thin Thread was cancelled as a result in 2001, although it was extremely successful and extremely accurate. And this was what happened just shortly afterwards of Thin Thread being cancelled. Three weeks later.
They are letting us stay up. I'm not sure why. Newark is allowing us to stay up. Only the news helicopters are allowed up out of the entire country. We're like 5 people in the air. That's it. Oh my God, what's going on? It's like the side of the building just blew out, Chet, on the other side, the side we can't see. Look at it. Oh my God. The whole tower collapsed. The whole building is gone. The whole building. Oh. Daniela, did you hear me? The entire building collapsed. It is gone. People. Oh God.
Now I don't know about you, but I get a cold shiver go down all throughout my body whenever I see any footage of 9/11, and the hairs stand up on my arms. So how does Bill know that Thin Thread would have stopped 9/11? I mean, you know, it's just saying, hey, it would have stopped 9/11 is just hyperbole, really. It can't be proven. However, Bill does know it would have stopped 9/11, and so do many other people on his team and the people he worked with. Let's listen to how he knows that.
After 9/11 and after we left, Tom took over running Thin Thread. And he said, well, let's take the software in Thin Thread and run it against the database that we've accumulated inside NSA to find out if there's any information of the 9/11 attack that we should have known about but didn't.
We let it run. It was somewhere around 24 to 36 hours. I remember my program manager coming back with the initial results, and they were just devastating. We discovered critical intelligence, Al-Qaeda and associated movement intelligence that had never been discovered by NSA. They didn't even know they had it in their databases. But also the specific details of numbers and movement and times and locations, travel. And you're seeing the dispersal patterns that occurred after it happened. You're also seeing that there was parts of the plot in which they weren't successful.
So as you can see there, Bill, after 9/11, he became disillusioned with the NSA because of what happened. They seemed to be more concerned with how much money they were going to get. Like I say, it's in the documentary A Good American. Watch it. It's brilliant. It really is. And one of his colleagues took over, and they decided, right, okay, let's fire Thin Thread up. Let's run all the data through it that would have been run through it prior to 9/11, and there you go. There's the proof. Thin Thread, all of the warning indicators would have flashed red, and they would have found exactly who the terrorists were, not just who they were talking to overseas. You get the point. Now, there's a reason why I've included all that, is because whenever you mention Bill Binney to some people, they just, ex-NSA, whatever. This guy's an expert, and I think by now it's beyond a doubt to anybody who's watching this video that Bill Binney is not just an expert on deciphering communications and metadata. He's the expert on deciphering communications and metadata. This is the guy. you go to. So let's go back to the interview that he did with Tommy the weekend and see what he says next.
President Trump asked for you to have a meeting with one of his cabinet members on this, and could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, but there's a longer story here that your listeners need to know. First of all, Guccifer, the original Guccifer was a Romanian hacker who was picked up and arrested, and then after him, in July, when WikiLeaks was getting ready to publish a lot of the emails, all of a sudden Guccifer 2 appeared.
Okay.
Now the original Guccifer thought that this Guccifer 2 was a fabrication. And then Guccifer 2 started claiming that he hacked the DNC, and he had data from the DNC, and he was doing it for the Russians.
Okay.
So he then, later on, put this data out on the web as the data that he hacked from Russia, from the DNC. So he claimed that. So now we had some data to look at forensically and look and see exactly what we could tell from the data itself, what it meant, and whether or not it was really a hack. And that's exactly what we did.
So as you heard there right at the beginning of that, these findings of Bill and his team and VIPs, President Trump does know about them. Could that explain why he's going against? This is just a question, by the way. It's not my belief. It's just a question. Could that explain why Trump is going against what his intelligence community is telling him, and why people like Rob Reiner are saying what they're doing online and losing their minds and saying this is World War III? But to go back to what Bill said there, he's analysing the only pieces of evidence we actually have as to whether Guccifer 2 actually is who he and the FBI claim him to be, that he is an agent for GRU, as was in the indictment of Mueller. And he analysed that data. So let's see what Bill's conclusions are after analysing these documents that the FBI are asserting are from the DNC, and they're from this hack by Guccifer.
So we started looking at this, and what this file here is simply every data file, the amount of bytes in the data, plus the timestamp at the end of the file. And it was file after file, timestamp after timestamp. So you could take between any two timestamps and calculate the number of bytes involved, or bits, and also then the rate of transfer of the data. With every file you could do that.
Okay.
So, and the highest rate of transfer we got from this was 49.1 megabytes per second. Now we knew that could not go across the network, but some of the people claimed that it could. So we tried it. So we said, okay, we had some people here put up a data set of about 1 gigabyte, and we had some friends in Europe that would try to test it to see how quickly they could pull it across. And they did it from various locations in the Netherlands, in Albania, and Belgrade, and also in the UK. And the fastest rate we got was from a data center in New Jersey, and a data center to a data center in the UK, and that was 12 megabytes per second, which is less than a fourth of the rate necessary to transfer the data as it was listed from Guccifer 2.
Wow, it was less than a fourth
of
what they're claiming.
Yeah, and so that meant you couldn't, that just simply meant that this was an impossible transfer at that rate.
So what do you, so it couldn't have been, however,
it is a perfect download rate for a thumb drive.
So Bill and his team at VIPs tested if this hack could be done remotely, and the download speeds were off. Their conclusions were that it could not. And like Bill says there, other people said it could. Now, I'm not aware of anybody that has proved that this could be done. Now, this was reported in The Nation at the time. Here's the document. But that article by The Nation came under attack from a wide range of people. And they had to take the article down. I think that was wrong. I think that they were reporting on on forensic analysis done by experts, and I don't think they should have taken that article down. It is back up now. It's got lots of editors' notes, I believe. But many people drew conclusions that Bill's findings were wrong just based on the fact that the Nation took their article down and they said, well, other people said it could be done. Again, I'm not if somebody is aware of somebody proving that transfer speed could be done, by all means, show me the evidence. So far, I have seen none. But the thing is, even if it could be proven that the data transfer could be done at that speed, that's only part of Vips's findings. Let's listen to what else he said in that interview.
But it gets even deeper than this, guys.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, so go ahead and tell us then what you guys discovered with the 2 potential files on the different dates.
Then we were looking at the data, and Guccifer 2 put out 2 sets of data.
Okay.
One dated the 5th of July of 2016, the other dated the 1st of September of 2016. So we started looking a little closer at it since it was during the basically same compacted amount of time. And if you looked at it and you ignored the hour and the date, but looked at minutes, seconds, and milliseconds, those 2 data sets merged just like that. So that meant that Guccifer 2 was manipulating the data. He was taking one file down, splitting it into 2 parts, issuing one for the 5th of July and one for the 1st of September. So he's fabricating. He's manipulating and changing the data, and so the whole thing is about Guccifer 2 is a fabrication.
The whole thing by Guccifer 2 is a fabrication, he says. It goes further than that because obviously this is not part of Bill's analysis, but there's proof there that in those documents that Guccifer released that he's copy and pasted Russian stuff onto the documents to point the finger at Russia. Now, why would he do that? And whereas Vips's findings on the transfer speed and other have had other theories mentioned, as far as I can tell, nobody has an explanation as to why Guccifer would be manipulating the data in that way. Certainly not an innocent explanation. There have been explanations, but none of them are innocent. But what about the intelligence assessment that blames Russia? Well, let's listen to what Bill said about that.
Well, originally, if you go back, the intelligence community assessment report that was issued in January of 2017, that report was basically selected analysts from NSA, CIA, and FBI. So they were selected people, not the normal ones working the problem, and so they got a selective result, and that was that intelligence community assessment that they put out, which was not really an intelligence community assessment. That would be a national intelligence estimate. You know, if you had all the community agencies coming together to say that this is what we all have and what we all have determined, then it becomes a national intelligence estimate, not an intelligence community. The intelligence community's got 16 or 17 different, if you count the DNI, I don't really count them, but so they say 17 agencies. Well,
17 agencies, what? Clarify to the viewers what the 17 agencies, what they say about that. I think some of them may know, but others may not.
Well, I mean,
they claimed.
Well, the 3 agencies only claimed that this was highly likely. Now, it's even worse than that because only 2 claimed it to be highly likely. And they were the 2 that didn't matter. That was CIA and FBI. The one that did matter was NSA. And they said they had moderate confidence.
So how much have you heard of that? Or did you hear 17 agencies? I know that's what I heard at the time. It was repeated non-stop. It still is on some news organisations. Bill Maher is probably saying it to this day because he used to say it all the time. One of the reasons why I stopped listening to Bill Maher. Let's just listen to what Bill says next there.
Now,
but they go out and claim that 17 agencies
claim
across
17,
the board.
yeah.
So you guys heard on the news how 17 agencies collaborated, that the DNC hack was actually committed by Russians, which was part of the narrative of this fake Russian collusion witch hunt against our president.
Yep. And because that was one of the first things that told me that this entire story was false, was the fact that NSA had moderate stuff, and they didn't come out and clearly say, this is what was hacked, it went here and it went there, and that place over there is where they did it from. Because if you recall, about 4 years ago, the Chinese hacked into some stuff here in the U.S., and then NSA came out and said, yes, they did it from that building in Shanghai. You can tell that by the IPs, and NSA has all these traceroute programs on the web inside the United States, because they're watching us too, and also around the world. So if anybody's going to, and the choke points are the points of transfer to the transoceanic cables. So that's where all the foreign stuff comes in, all the stuff going to foreigners goes out, all the stuff transiting the U.S. from foreigner to foreigner, like from Europe to Japan.
Right.
That goes through the U.S. and they all come into those choke points of where the transoceanic cables surface, and NSA covers them like hound dog.
Okay, so he's saying there about 4 or 5 years ago, and the reason we know that what he's talking about there is absolutely true. I give you this article from The Guardian. There are many others as well. Mastering the Internet, GCHQ. That's our version, I suppose, of your NSA or your intelligence agencies. GCHQ taps fibre optic cables for secret access to world's communications. And why do we know about all this? Well, we know about all this because of a gentleman who you've probably heard of called Edward Snowden. This was from the 21st of June on 2013. This article was in The Guardian. I'm just going to read a bit of it. British spy agency GCHQ has secretly gained access to the network of cables which carry the world's phone calls and internet traffic, and has started to process vast streams of sensitive personal information which it is sharing with its American partner, the National Security Agency, the NSA. One key innovation has been GCHQ's ability to tap into and store huge volumes of data drawn from fibre optic cables for up to 30 days so that it can be sifted and analysed. That operation, codenamed Tempora, has been running for some 18 months. I'm not sure about the the NSA version of this. It might be X-Keyscore. I might be wrong on that though. If I'm wrong, please somebody tell me. GCHQ and the NSA are consequently able to access and process vast quantities of communications between entirely innocent people as well as targeted suspects. This includes recordings of phone calls, the content of email messages, entries on Facebook, and the history of any internet user's access to websites, all of which is deemed legal, even though the warrant system was supposed to limit interception to a specified range of targets. Now, that's something that ThinThread would have been able to do. You would have been able to have everybody anonymous because it was all encrypted, and as soon as one of the red lights starts blinking of those 5 data points that Bill mentioned, you could go in, then get a warrant, and you could start looking at who that person was. The article continues. The existence of the program has been disclosed in documents shown to The Guardian by NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden, as I mentioned, as part of his attempt to expose what he has called the largest program of suspicionless surveillance in human history. It is not just a US problem. The UK has a huge dog in this fight, Snowden told The Guardian. They, GCHQ, are worse than the US. Now, what I find interesting about that is that when all this came out, the government slapped a D notice on media organisations from talking about any of the findings that Edward Snowden's document leak exposed. I'm thinking specifically of PRISM. They slapped a D notice on them, on the NSA program PRISM being mentioned in the media. This is actually from WikiLeaks. It's freely available. It says there, in June 2013, a DA notice was issued asking the media to refrain from running further stories related to the US prison program and British involvement therein. And there you see, just a couple of months after these articles came out in the media, in October 2013, Prime Minister David Cameron made a veiled threat to newspapers over NSA and GCHQ leaks, stating in Parliament that the government might, quote, use injunctions or denotices or the other tougher measures, end quote, to restrain publication of leaked classified information if newspapers did not voluntarily. I'm very sorry. Somebody wanted me. I'll say that again. In October 2013, Prime Minister David Cameron made a veiled threat to newspapers to restrain publication of leaked classification information if newspapers did not voluntarily stop publishing them. And look at that. In 2017, a notice was issued against British journalists revealing the identity of the British author of controversial dossier, Christopher Steele. They issued one on him as well. Just thought I'd mention that. They also did a denotice on the names of Pablo Miller and Orbis Business Intelligence when the Skripals were poisoned. I've done videos on that if you want to see them. So that's absolutely true what Bill has just said. So what does Bill think the chances are that Guccifer is who he is, or is who the intelligence community says he is? I'm a math guy, so I really like his answer here.
Where he can see how these files were tampered with, the dates were changed, but the time frame merges them perfectly. And tell us about the mathematical chances of this, like we were talking.
Well, it's like 40 or 50 files that merge from the September 1st data into the 5 July. And if you just said, well, what's the chance of any one matching a gap in the 5 July data?
Any one.
It's like probably 1 in 100, going through the seconds and all over the time period. And then you could say, I mean, that would be a rough estimate. And then you could say, okay, well then the probability of them both merging is like 1 chance in 100 to the 50th power.
And what does that mean to us non-mathematical
Well, it's like
folks?
a 1 followed by 100 zeros. 1 chance in that number.
I'm a math guy, as I said, so I know what 1 followed by 100 zeros is. Here you go. It's called a Google. A Google is a 10 to the 100th power, which is 1 followed by 100 zeros. A Google is larger than the number of elementary particles in the universe, which amount to only 10 to the 80th power. That's the chances, according to Bill Binney and Vips, of Guccifer being, I'd say of Guccifer giving us factual information and not manipulating the data. We'll say that. That's hard evidence. That's hard evidence. So what I'd like to say to these TV anchors and these personalities and anybody online, people who just think that we're all kooks and we're all conspiracy theories, or conspiracy theorists rather. That's evidence. That's evidence that so far has not been refuted at all. That's also evidence that the President of the United States has. Now just think about it. Could it be this is why he's going against the intelligence community? Now, you tell me. Would you, I'm going to end with a short little video on this, but you tell me, everything I've just shown you, is that compelling evidence that this isn't a hack at all? Is that compelling evidence that Guccifer is not who he claims to be, and who the intelligence community in America are claiming to be? And there are many, many other questions that need to be asked as well, of course. Many other questions. Questions such as, why is it that they will report in the media and they will talk about it all day long about Guccifer 2 being a Russian guy, and they won't talk about the Russian stuff that was copy-pasted. They won't talk about that at all. You know, this is from the Sun. This is some great work, by the way. I found this out because of the great work from Adam Carter and Elizabeth Lee Voss on Disobedient Media. They have done brilliant work on this, brilliant independent investigative work. This is from The Sun. This spy who texted me, Playboy model and Bond girl Robin Young, had steamy online affair with Russian spy Gusev II, accused of meddling with US election. And they'll publish the sex between them. Published them. Strange though, they don't publish these other texts that they had between them. Who is this person, she says. His name is Seth. He was my whistleblower. They don't talk about that when they're talking about Gusev, do they? That's not something that Rachel Maddow makes a big deal out of. So you've got to ask yourself this question, and I say this to all the TV anchors, and there are some out there I really do respect, especially those online who believe this Russia, believe everything the intelligence community is telling them, and their excuse when we say we don't believe it is, oh, not everything is a conspiracy theory. Listen, we're not conspiracy theorists. This is evidence. Where's your evidence? Where's Mueller's evidence that it was a hack? And I'm not talking, oh, well, they did this and hearsay and conjecture and opinion. I'm talking cast iron evidence that we can actually look at and dissect, like the evidence that Vips has given us. Would you rather believe, after seeing all this today, and please go off and don't take my word for it, go and do your own research. Don't listen to other people, listen to their interviews and listen to what they say, and listen to that documentary, A Good American. You must watch it if you are interested in this. It is fantastic. Would you rather believe somebody like Bill Binney, who is a patriot, who left the NSA because he thought it was wrong that they were doing things for money rather than protecting the American people? Would you rather believe Bill, or would you rather believe this guy?
As Director Tenet has pointed out, Secretary Powell presented evidence last week that Baghdad has failed to disarm its weapons of mass destruction.
Personally, at the moment, I know which side I'm on. Whenever any assertions come out about Russia, don't take it at face value from either side. Check it and double check it and triple check it. Scrutinize everything they say. Because while I don't know exactly what went on, I can't say that with any degree of certainty at all, and I don't think anybody can. But the one thing's for sure. The intelligence community and these TV anchors who were saying that it was Russia that did it, Governor, and people like Rob Reiner who are being extremely hyperbolic and ramping up tensions and want almost war between Russia and America because of this. You have to tell them, stop it, look at the evidence. Because where's the evidence to say that what you're saying is true? I leave it up to you to draw your own conclusions. If you enjoyed this video, please click the bell down there and subscribe so you get a notification of next time I drop a video. Also, I can't do this without your help, so if you can afford it and you enjoy my videos, please support the channel by subscribing to my Patreon. Link is down there. You can do it for as little as $1 a month, and it really does help. If you can't afford it, that's fine. Please share my work and talk to other people about the issues that I bring up. Thanks very much for your support. Until next time, peace and take care.